Ever dreamt of flying nonstop from Singapore to New York? Well, buckle up because today we're diving deep into the world of ultra long-haul flights.
Oh, yeah.
Journeys that are literally shrinking the globe.
Literally.
We've got some fascinating articles about the Airbus A350-900ULR, Singapore Airlines dueling JFK and Newark routes,
Look.
and Qantas's ambitious Project Sunrise, which aims to push those boundaries even further.
It's incredible to see how airlines are tackling these marathon flights, not just in terms of getting you there, but rethinking the entire passenger experience.
Okay, so let's unpack this, starting with the aircraft that's making it all possible.
Okay.
The Airbus A350-900ULR. I've heard these planes have a special Airspace cabin. Is that just marketing hype, or does it actually make a difference on a flight this long?
It's definitely more than just a fancy name. Think about the challenges of being on a plane for 18-plus hours.
Right.
The fatigue, the dryness, the potential for jet lag. The Airspace cabin is designed to address all of that with higher ceilings, wider seats, and a more spacious feel overall. They've even lowered the cabin altitude to the equivalent of about 6,000 feet.
I'm trying to picture that. So it's like you're flying, but at a lower altitude than usual. Wouldn't that make it harder to breathe?
Actually, the opposite is true. Lowering the cabin altitude helps reduce those feelings of stuffiness and dryness you get on long flights. It's like a breath of fresh air.
Okay.
Literally, because the A350 also has advanced air filtration systems that constantly refresh the cabin air.
Yeah.
But the real game changer for me is the lighting.
They've got that LED system with like 16 million color combinations, right? What are some of the ways they use all those colors to benefit passengers?
It's about more than just creating a cool ambiance.
Right.
Though it certainly does that. By mimicking natural daylight cycles, the lighting system can actually help regulate your body's internal clock and reduce jet lag.
Yeah.
Imagine stepping off a 19-hour flight and actually feeling refreshed.
Wow.
That's what they're aiming for.
That would be incredible. No more feeling like a zombie for the first few days of your trip. But let's talk about another big complaint people have about long flights.
Okay.
The noise. How have they managed to address that in the A350-900ULR?
The A350 is known for having the quietest cabin of any twin-aisle wide-body aircraft. They've used new engine technologies and noise-dampening materials to create a much more peaceful environment, even in economy class. And when you're on a flight, as long as that kind of tranquility can make a huge difference.
So it's not just about getting you from point A to point B. It's about making that journey as comfortable and bearable as possible. Which brings us to Singapore Airlines, the current leader in ultra-long-haul flights. They're the ones with those nonstop Singapore to New York routes, right?
That's right. And they actually operate two distinct routes, one to JFK and the other to Newark. They both clock in at around 9,500 miles, utilize the A350-900ULR, and run daily.
So why two routes that are so close together? Is there actually a noticeable difference for passengers?
The key difference lies in the subtle variations in flight times and how that impacts things like the meal service. The JFK route typically has a slightly longer flight duration due to prevailing winds and flight path structure. This means the first meal service on the JFK flight is supper after takeoff. However, the Newark flight departs in the early morning hours, so they serve lunch first.
So it's like choosing between an early dinner or a late breakfast, but in the air. Fascinating. But both routes ultimately utilize the same aircraft and aim for a similar level of passenger comfort.
Exactly. It comes down to personal preference and what aligns better with your natural rhythms or schedule. Do you want to eat and then try to sleep, or would you rather have a daytime departure and settle in for the long haul?
I can see the appeal of both options. It's cool that Singapore Airlines is giving passengers a choice. But while Singapore Airlines is pushing boundaries, Qantas is aiming to leapfrog them entirely with Project Sunrise. These flights would be even longer than anything currently offered.
Qantas's Project Sunrise is incredibly ambitious. They're planning nonstop flights from Sydney to London, a whopping 10,573 miles, and a Sydney to New York route as well. Think about that being on a plane for 19-20 hours.
19 to 20 hours.
Yeah.
It's almost hard to wrap my head around. What are some of the unique challenges of a flight that long, and how is Qantas trying to overcome them?
One challenge is just the sheer physical and mental endurance required for a journey that length.
Yeah.
Passengers need to be able to move around, stretch, maybe even get some exercise. Qantas is addressing this with a new first-class suite and something they're calling wellness zones.
Yeah.
It's all part of their commitment to creating a more holistic travel experience, not just getting you there, but getting you there feeling as good as possible.
Wellness zones. Now that's intriguing. What exactly do those entail, and how will they contribute to passenger well-being on such a long flight?
The details are still under wraps, but It seems like they're looking at designated spaces where people can stretch, move around, maybe even engage in some light exercise or relaxation activities. Think of it as a mini oasis within the plane, designed to combat that feeling of being cooped up for 20 hours.
So it's not just about fancy seats and mood lighting, it's about recognizing the psychological impact of these ultra long-haul flights and taking steps to address it. I'm really curious to see how these wellness zones play out. Do you think they could become the standard for these kinds of flights in the future?
It's certainly possible. Passenger expectations are changing, and airlines are having to adapt. Think about it, if you're going to be on a plane for the better part of a day, it's no longer just about enduring the flight. It's about experiencing it, maybe even enjoying it.
That's a really interesting point. It's like the flight itself is becoming a destination, not just a means of transportation.
Exactly, and that raises some fascinating questions. How do you create a sense of community on a flight that long? How do you keep people engaged and entertained for 20 hours? These are the challenges Qantas is grappling with, and it'll be interesting to see what solutions they come up with.
It's almost like they're trying to create a mini society in the sky. But all of this, the comfort, the wellness zones, these incredibly long flights, wouldn't be possible without some serious technological advancements, right?
Absolutely. The A350 series, which both Singapore Airlines and Qantas are using for their ultra-long-haul flights, represents a huge leap forward in aviation technology. One key factor is fuel efficiency.
Yeah.
These planes are designed to sip fuel, which is crucial when you're talking about flights that last almost an entire day.
So not only does that make these flights economically viable, but it also helps reduce their environmental impact.
Exactly. It's a win-win situation both for the airlines and for the planet. But it's not just about fuel efficiency. These planes are also incredibly quiet, thanks to new engine technologies and noise-dampening materials. Remember that sense of tranquility we were talking about? That's a direct result of these technological advancements.
It's amazing to think about how far aviation has come. But for those of us who haven't had the chance to experience one of these ultra-long-haul flights yet, can you paint a picture of what it's actually like? What should someone expect if they book a ticket on one of these marathon journeys?
Well, imagine this. You board the plane, settle into your seat, and you know that for the next 19 or 20 hours, this aircraft is your world. You're essentially suspended in time and space, traversing vast distances while the world below you shrinks and expands.
I have to admit, the thought of being confined to a plane for that long makes me a little claustrophobic. How do you deal with that sense of confinement and the potential for boredom?
That's where all those innovations we've been discussing come into play. The comfortable seating, the mood, lighting, the fresh air, the quiet cabin, the in-flight entertainment options, and of course those intriguing wellness zones. It's all designed to make those 20 hours as bearable and maybe even enjoyable as possible.
So it's not just about enduring the flight, it's about embracing it, maybe even finding ways to thrive within that unique environment. Do you think these ultra long-haul flights are just a fad? Or are they the future of air travel?
It's hard to say for sure, but I think they're here to stay. As technology continues to improve and passenger expectations evolve, we'll likely see these flights become even more common and accessible.
And maybe one day we'll be looking back and wondering how we ever managed to travel without them.
Exactly. It might seem mind-boggling now, but in the future, hopping on a plane and flying nonstop to the other side of the world could be as commonplace as catching a train to the next town.
So we've explored the technology, the passenger experience, and the potential impact of these ultra long-haul flights. But let's circle back to something you mentioned earlier, Singapore Airlines having two very similar routes to New York, one to JFK and one to Newark. For someone booking a trip, is there a better option? What are some of the factors they should consider when making that choice? It's interesting that such a seemingly minor difference, JFK versus Newark, could actually have a significant impact on someone's trip. What are some of the key things travelers should keep in mind when choosing between these two Singapore Airlines routes?
It really boils down to considering your overall travel itinerary and what's most important to you. First, think about where you're ultimately headed in the New York area. If your final destination is in Manhattan, JFK often has better public transportation options.
I can see how that would be a major factor, especially after a long flight. You wouldn't want to deal with a complicated or time-consuming transfer into the city.
Exactly. While getting from Newark to Manhattan is doable, it can be a bit more of a hassle. Newark might be the better choice if you're staying in New Jersey or traveling to other parts of the Northeast. It has easier access to major highways and other transportation hubs.
So it's all about weighing the convenience factor based on your individual travel plans.
Absolutely. Another thing to consider, especially if you're not ending your journey in New York, is connecting flights. If you're planning to hop on another flight, it's crucial to compare connection times and flight schedules at both JFK and Newark. One airport might offer a smoother, less stressful connection, depending on your destination and the airline you're flying with.
That makes a lot of sense. The last thing you'd want after an ultra-long-haul flight is to miss a connection and end up stuck in an airport for hours. You'd probably lose that refreshed and ready-to-go feeling pretty quickly.
You're telling me. And even though both airports are in the New York area, they each have their own distinct vibe. JFK is a massive international hub, bustling with energy, while Newark tends to be a bit quieter and more manageable.
It's almost like choosing between two completely different travel experiences right from the moment you land.
That's a great way to put it. And finally, don't forget about practicalities like ground transportation costs and availability. Depending on your budget and where you're staying, one airport might offer more affordable or convenient options for getting to your final destination.
It sounds like choosing between JFK and Newark is almost as complex as planning the entire trip itself. But you've given us a lot of food for thought. Thanks for breaking that down for us.
My pleasure.
Yeah.
It's always interesting to explore these seemingly small details that can actually have a big impact on the overall travel experience. And that's what these deep dives are all about, uncovering those hidden layers of information and helping you make more informed decisions.
Well, listeners, we've reached the end of our journey into the world of ultra-long-haul flights. We've talked about the mind-blowing technology that makes these marathon flights possible, the lengths airlines are going to in order to keep passengers comfortable and entertained, and the potential impact these flights could have on the future of travel.
We've learned that it's not just about getting from point A to point B anymore. It's about the entire experience from the moment you step on the plane to the moment you reach your final destination.
But now we want to hear from you. What are your thoughts on this ultra-long-haul revolution? Are you excited about the prospect of flying nonstop to practically anywhere in the world? Or does the idea of spending that much time in the air fill you with dread?
We've given you a lot to consider today, but ultimately the choice of whether or not to embrace these marathon flights is yours. Weigh the pros and cons, do your research, and choose the travel options that best suit your needs and preferences.
And who knows, maybe one day we'll all be jetting off to far-flung destinations on these ultra-long-haul flights, enjoying a level of comfort and convenience that we can only dream of today. Until then, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep your eyes on the skies.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll see you next time for another fascinating exploration of a topic that's sure to spark your curiosity.
Safe travels, everyone.